everyone, and a warm welcome on this episode of Digital Dialogues powered by CXO Digital Paths. In today's rapidly evolving cybersecurity domain, emerging technologies are reshaping the landscape, promising enhanced protection and introducing new challenges. Today, we will discuss one approach that involves analyzing behavioral fingerprints on open source images at runtime. It is perceived to enable real time detection of anomalies and potential threats, ensuring a robust security measure. Today, we have Jimmy Mesta, who's the CTO and co founder at RAD Security. He will be delving deeper into this technology, understanding its implication, and harness its potential to safeguard our digital future against increasingly sophisticated threats. A very warm welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you very much, Pratik. Happy to be here.
Great. So, Jimmy, this concept of behavioral fingerprints of open source images, if you can just delve and explain us and for the sake of our audience in context of cybersecurity, and as per you, how does it enhance the overall cybersecurity posture and threat detection capabilities for an organization?
Absolutely. Let's start at the beginning. So the concept of behavioral fingerprinting is not necessarily a new one in the field of cybersecurity. We've seen it with network security tools in the past, and even traditional sort of legacy architecture. What we're working on now is applying those methodologies with some of the most modern tech out there, including AI, LLMs, we'll get into that later, to construct behavioral fingerprints for containers. And if you really look at containers as the latest compute revolution, where it's basically running everything under the sun these days, it makes sense that we should start really tracking behavior in a reliable, reproducible way. So the concept of behavioral fingerprints, especially with open source images, lets us try to get beyond pre-deployment checks such as SCA, SaaS tools, SBOM generation, CVE scanning. All of those things play a really important part in the health and security of a given workload, but they don't really answer the question of runtime security. What is this workload or this container supposed to be doing when it's in a state that's running, whether that's in Kubernetes or serverless function or something like that. So that was the big audacious goal, I guess, beginning this work and this research. And what we found is some really interesting use cases. So that's really what they are, and they have a lot of capabilities that we can talk about as well.
Great. And while you explained us, that it's not something new, but still the way it is riding one above the other and creating multiple levels for cybersecurity, how do you see this impact the future landscape of cybersecurity for us?
Well, cybersecurity is a huge field, as we all know. The world of endpoint protection, antivirus, malware, email security, it all has its place. The main goal here is to protect running applications, right? Where usually your crown jewels live, whether you're a giant company that 10,000 developers shipping software every 30 seconds to production, or you're a startup or a bank. Everybody relies on workloads to kind of run their business these days. So it's not going to solve all of the cybersecurity problems, but in that context, workloads are, at least in my opinion, very important from a verification and protection standpoint. So the overall landscape for me, and the goal long term, is to not be in such a reactive position in cybersecurity. I've been 16 years in this space, and most of my work and my colleagues and peers over those years, we're dealing with things after the fact. The CVE came out. Let's go see if we're vulnerable. There's a vulnerability that we found, a little bit too late. It's very rare that we can get ahead of these things. And I think the world wants to move towards secure by design as a concept. But there's a lot of steps to get there. And I think this is just, one small contribution towards that.
Okay. And there's also one thing that right now the organizations were struggling to keep the data secure. But when we talk about behavioral fingerprint analysis, a lot of ethics also come into the foreplay. So how can organization align with ethical standards and respect the user privacy with behavioral fingerprint analysis?
Yeah, that's a good question because privacy, ethical standards, these things are starting to really intertwine with just cybersecurity in general. The more controls you have in place, the more inspection you do, the more you can see, and that data is not necessarily supposed to leak into different places. So at least with the initial kind of release and iteration of our open source catalog, with these behavioral fingerprints, we tend to kind of keep it very pure on the behaviors that the container exhibits at the kernel level. So we're not inspecting layer 7 traffic, looking for PII, looking for any sort of database calls in that regard in plain text. It's really about what are the characteristics of a workload at that lower level. So the process tree, file system access, any network calls that look suspicious. So in that regard, there's not a lot of privacy concerns, especially with open source images. As the capability progresses, it is something we will have to keep very closely, beside us to make sure that we're in line with rights and regulations.
So do you think the regulations gonna evolve as the technology evolves with that speed? Because as we have also observed with AI, the regulations are taking some time to catch up with the capabilities that organizations are leveraging for AI.
Yeah, I think regulations evolve pretty slow. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, but we are seeing, I just did a podcast with Chris Hughes, who's kind of he's well known in the kind of regulatory space. And, his observation is that even in the US government, things are starting to move visibly faster in regulation because they have to, right? Like AI, you can't wait 3 years to regulate AI. It's too late. The genie's out of the bottle. So I think things will progress. But my hope is that it's not at the demise of innovation, right? You can't regulate something before we figured it out because there's so much good to be had. So my hope is that regulations are reasonable and allow for kind of that open-ended innovation, including in cybersecurity.
Yep. And I think till then we have to rely on the responsible use of these emerging technologies at the each individual's end. Okay. And while coming back to behavioral fingerprint analysis, when organizations are implementing them, so what are the primary challenges at pre or say post implementation stage, especially in terms when it comes to at scale implementation, and how can these be mitigated?
Yeah. Anytime you're building something new based off of a hypothesis that hasn't really been done before, I think you have to take a very iterative approach. We started doing kind of producing our first behavioral fingerprints for open source images specifically and publishing them probably 6 months ago, after the technology was at a place where we could do it at scale and automatically and with automation. And there's as that began, we decided initially like these are going to change a lot. We're going to learn what works, what doesn't, what are the pain points. So we actually made the fingerprints version controlled. Like they have API versions similar to other, parts of the stack, knowing that this is going to be an evolving standard, not just like a static asset that never changes. So, with that, we have changed some things, right? We've had to implement much more robust pattern matching sort of algorithms to maintain stability of these like codified fingerprints, performance, on a scale when you're talking, a 10,000 node cluster with hundreds of thousands of images. You're trying to baseline and then continuously, like, more or less threat hunt in real time automatically. That takes a new data processing pipeline. Like, the things we used before did not work pretty quickly. So you have to, keep iterating on those scale challenges. So it's not all figured out, and that's okay. We are just at a place now where we can have a little more elasticity with scale, and we're looking forward to stress testing that system over time.
And I think with the evolution of this technology in itself, there's another layer where it must or it should complement to other existing cybersecurity structure within an organization, because there are multiple. I'm sure this will not go solo in it. So in what ways do you foresee that behavioral fingerprint analysis will complement to the existing outlet security structure, or say infrastructure, to create a more robust defense system for enterprises?
Yeah, I mean, defense in depth is still the thing, right? We started saying that phrase many, many, many years ago, and it still applies today. I think there's not one tool, one product, one vendor that's going to solve all of these problems. They all have to work together. Yes, you have options, between CSPMs or endpoint detection tools, but this day and age, this like, the modern detection engineering team is gets more value out of what we call enrichment, right? And all enrichment really is saying, like, here's your individual alert, and I'm going to go query all the other systems I have that may tell a better story about that alert, right? And I think we're going to, with these fingerprints, it's part of the enrichment pipeline, right? If you have other kind of anomalies or log entries that are, firing off alerts, you're going to want to know what the expected behavior is through the fingerprint. If you see drift, well, okay, what else is happening in the system? So it's a piece of the puzzle that I think, I believe has been a gap for a long time, but it really works best when connected with those other systems that are in play, and including things like, our artifact signing, SBOM generation, CVE scanning, just posture management. All of that is really only enhanced when you have the runtime lens on top of it.
Okay. And while complementing with the existing structure, the other new emerging technologies, if I say artificial intelligence and machine learning, are into play. So, what role do you see AI ML playing to enhance the effectiveness of behavioral fingerprint analysis?
Yeah, a big one. This is an area we've been focusing on, and myself personally, pretty deeply. You can ask my team the middle of the night, AI messages that they get from me. I just see, okay, if you take kind of LLMs at their core, already a useful construct for, getting some level of reasoning out of sequences of events. They're great at detecting anomalies. The classic kind of ML or statistical models that we've had to build in the past, they kind of just work with a lot of these new kind of prompt-based LLM structures. And then to put on top of that, things like RAG or fine tuning where you can accept user feedback and think about a behavioral fingerprint. If someone says, "Hey, this part of it doesn't look valid," or that drift sequence actually wasn't as dangerous as you said it was, or this looks more dangerous. Like if we can start taking that feedback and getting it back into the model, um, you're building a SOC analyst team basically under the hood through AI automation. It's not perfect. I think we have a ways to go, but I'm more convinced, even in the past few weeks with some of the latest Claude releases and the newer GPT-4o models and some of the local models, even like Llama 3, and like they're performing pretty complicated tasks fairly reliably, and it's getting more affordable and more performant. And things only get better, and it's happening so quickly. So I think you'd be crazy not to jump on AI to help with some of your tasks in security these days. We're understaffed, right? Like, and any help we can get is a good thing.
And while we have just coming to the conclusion of our conversation, and this question is more from the perspective of from the boardroom discussions. So we know a lot of technical advancements are happening, and it's on a very dynamic landscape. Each day there's something different coming. Even in LLMs, we see the kind of evolution they are having, riding one above the other, or working in collaboration with multiple LLMs together. And then we have this behavioral fingerprint analysis also. When it comes to a boardroom discussion for enterprise to take a call to adopt behavioral fingerprint analysis, if may I ask you, what would be the key pointers? Maybe three, maybe four, that's up to you. What would be those pointers for the executives who are finally making that go no go decision?
Yeah. So it's obviously, when you're talking, and we do this a lot to kind of boardroom C-level executives, you have to go a little higher up the stack than just describing the actual technical implementation. I look at it like if runtime verification puts you in a position of detecting issues earlier in the pipeline or even at runtime. So just look, I mean, every executive is aware of the XZ vulnerability, right? It's been around the news constantly. It was a 0-day. Luckily, it was caught kind of by luck, really. And I think it really was a bit of an eye-opening moment for executives. It's like, how do I know if I'm affected? Number one. And then number two, is this being exploited? And number three, what's the next XZ vulnerability, right? It's a very simple executive boardroom discussion to have, because a backdoor in a piece of banking software that goes unnoticed by a CVE scanner, like you're in trouble, right? So I think the pointer there is like if you want to get ahead of that next XZ or the next 0-day or supply chain attack, and have a more positive security model for the software that you are paying a lot of money to write and ship, deliver, and maintain, then you should consider behavioral fingerprinting as one tool in the tool belt.
As we come to the conclusion of this conversation, it would be fair enough to say that behavioral fingerprint analysis is here to mark a revolutionary stride in cybersecurity, turning every pixel and pattern into a scintilla against threats, thereby transforming passive data into proactive defense system for us. However, the challenges in maintaining user privacy and managing vast data intricately ensuring security does not compromise freedom. Thank you, Jimmy, for this conversation and helping us delve and understand more about behavioral fingerprint analysis. And a special thanks to our viewers for tuning in with us. Do watch out for our next episode for more insightful discussions. Till then, take care.